Okay, we're back. It's March 29th. Um, this is the Future Proof podcast. I'm Anthony, and I'm joined here with my co-hosts Francesca and Shane. And we're going to talk about the LLM race that's still raging, and it's quite interesting. And we've been following along. And the big news is that uh, Claude is the number one LLM ranked by LLM Sys. So that's pretty exciting news. What do you guys think about that?
I well, I mean, I'm not entirely surprised just given all of the the chatter that you're seeing across social media and online and just based on my own personal use. I mean, there was a time, several months ago where I was using Claude 2 pretty extensively to do things like text generation, and I became so frustrated with it because it just kept refusing to do what I thought were very basic tasks. Um, for various reasons. Either it would say there was a copyright violation or something else, or the text that would come back just sounded very generic and kind of robotic. And I got so frustrated with it that I canceled my subscription on the spot. I mean, I had been using it for a while, but the performance just seemed to change. Um, and I went right back to using GPT-4. Um, But since this new release, you can tell that they've made a lot of key improvements to address exactly those problems. And the biggest one for me was the refusal rate. Again, just refusing to give me answers to what I thought were very innocuous questions. So for me, I think maybe more than anything, it showed that the Anthropic team was really listening to the community. Because now the refusal rate is not only much lower, but the responses are just so much higher quality. So I'm not entirely surprised that the rankings are what they are now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I to take it even a step back from Shane talking about using Claude itself, I think the announcement of Claude 3, which, included the fact that Claude was usable upon the announcement, which we
Yep.
did not see with previous announcements like Gemini, the timing that Claude was right on the back heels of Gemini and that whole fiasco with their image generation and, some doubts about Google's ability to keep up in this AI race and maybe the missed opportunities they had. And then the blog post itself that Anthropic posted with the announce of 3 different Claude 3 models. The blog post was formatted so nicely. It kind of catered to multiple audiences with highly technical benchmarks that they outline in comparison to GPT-4 and Gemini. We're going to get into that later, to more user friendly or, kind of everyday person friendly guidelines of how you could apply each of the 3 models and explaining the differences in plain English. I mean, the announcement itself and the the difference that it was readily usable already seems to be way more appealing than previous models. I think it's interesting that LMSys Chat Arena leaderboard is a crowdsourced leaderboard, and so it has collected over 400,000 human preference votes to rank different LLMs. Um, it's impressive that Claude 3 Opus is number 1 now in such a
Yep.
short period of time from, crowdsourced votes, which means that people are rapidly adopting it. I don't know that I've personally experienced that much culture so sorry. Culture, uh, shift in that ChatGPT does feel like the default for, most people I talk to in very casual conversation, but I'm excited to dive into what Claude 3 is actually doing. Shane alluded to some of the massive improvements they made and maybe linking those to why someone would shift from ChatGPT to Claude 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say
Yeah.
for people who I think a lot of, particularly non-technical people who aren't paying, very close attention to a lot of these different resources, I would encourage people to go and check out the chatbot arena. We can drop the link in the show notes, but it'll allow you, among other things, to test models side by side, really just to see the difference in output. And I think maybe we're burying the lead a little bit here, but one of the big improvements that that Claude 3 comes with is that expanded context window, which we can talk a lot more about in detail. But essentially, we're talking about the working memory of these chatbots being able to provide a lot more context in your conversations, or in other words, uploading a lot more background to inform the conversation and the output that you're getting back, which is really a huge improvement over the last version of Claude, and even over ChatGPT, I'd say.
In the spirit of our podcast's mission, future proof and helping people cope with the Gen AI and LLMs, of course, like the race is really robust, right? And we're seeing we're seeing just really great improvements. And yes, we think we will definitely share LM for the people that are curious about literally like how the leaderboard of who's the best LLM. But ultimately, the one that you're using, all of these are really good, and ultimately, the one that you have or your team has, your company's made a choice for, will actually do pretty good work for you. But I kind of responding to what Francesca said, it is like there's like Anthropic really did a great job, I think, in their release, and I think that it's we're doing they released it on March 4th. It's March 29th. Clearly it's connected, right? Clearly people like read the release, looked at it, and they're absolutely using it. And I think that's why it's rising in up the ranks and now number one. And I think what Shane was talking about, both Shane and I are using Claude a lot, and we actually kind of like the prose that it prints to screen. But the race is going to be on because we know that OpenAI is going to release their version 5, and and then so you can imagine then Gemini is going to come back and release their version. So it's all going to roll out. But kind of shifting gears a little bit, I think looking at what Francesca brought up, the just kind of dissecting um the way Claude was introduced. Uh, let's shift our attention there for a second. I do agree completely with what you said, um, Francesca, is that they released a beautiful blog post. I mean, it's like in every way, right? They introduced their three families: Haiku, Sonnet, Opus. They were ready to be used, and they produced a set of benchmarks that are normally commonly used in the sort of researcher range of the people that are doing the research on LLMs. And they provided that for the public, obviously, but obviously some of it was for insiders and some of it's for outsiders. And we were looking at these benchmarks and trying to translate those benchmarks to like everyday users. Like I'm a marketing manager at company X. Like, what does this mean to me? Like, what I see that Claude Opus is 86.85 shot. What does that mean? Like, and why do I care? And then on the left-hand column, which we'll put this graphic we'll put this blog post in the show notes. But they have a graphic that's showing all of the Claude 3, Sonnet, Haiku, and Opus compared to ChatGPT 4, 3.5, and Gemini. And then on the left-hand side, they have all these, benchmarks, all of which I think are very scientific and obviously done for a reason. Does any of you guys want to chime in on like those benchmarks and like why we think they're important? And if not, we can kind of motor on. But I think these are all the ways that the teams compare themselves to each other.
Right. I mean, I what I get from just this one graphic, which is in the blog post, and will be added to the show notes. It's basically a table that is directly, explicitly comparing Claude 3, the family of Claude 3, to GPT-4 and 3.5 and Gemini Ultra and Pro. It's basically Anthropic saying, hey, we know there's a race and we are putting ourselves in the race, and we are saying we've got a foot ahead in the race. And this is the table that's going to scientifically prove or scientifically demonstrate that we are, a foot ahead in this race. But when I'm reading this with sort of the everyday user in mind, the marketing manager in mind, as Anthony said, or the person doing maybe data analysis for their company, or just someone who really has use for an LLM in their daily tasks, who might already be using an LLM. I want to know if the tool that I'm using is going to be the best tool for my job. And so when I look at a table like this, yes, I see that Anthropic realizes I, the user, want to know if I should be using Claude, GPT, or Gemini. But then when I look at the left-hand column that tells me the benchmarks, none of these benchmarks, I would say, are easily digestible to me as a marketing manager to know, oh, I should be using Claude over GPT-4. Or no, I'm using Gemini right now and I need to stick to Gemini. And I'd really love to see that bridge built or that gap
Mhm.
lessened between, the announcement in Anthropic or for any of the other developers and the audience that will be using this, and maybe the audience that's even participating in the LMSys chatbot arena vote. There is still some kind of disconnect, even though there is some display of knowing that the LLM race exists. There's a disconnect, I feel, based on just this graphic of benchmarks between what the companies are evaluating their models on and what maybe the user wants to know the models can do.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, Shane, I know you wanna jump in there, but just to kinda click on that, it's like I feel like these blog posts are they're insiders, right?
Right.
It's an insider kind of thing, and I think since when you're in a very hot like a hot market, insider knowledge also is where just the average user goes to find out something, right? And then they're presented something insider, and it's like, okay, the hella swag, like, what does that really mean? There's no like, so I think, what we'd like to do in the future, but just at least addressing today is that these benchmarks are important for insiders and for researchers to kind of know, are we there yet to release to the public? But from the public standpoint, it's like, what is the hella swag and how does that, make sense? And I know, Shane, you were kind of doing some analysis on the maybe you could shed some light there, but it's clearly pop culture now, and we're all talking about it. So these are important for some reason, but the bridge needs to be built for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the I agree with you that the benchmarks are in fact important because it is an iterative process to build and deploy these different models. And you
Mhm.
need some sort of performance benchmark to evaluate how much progress you're making.
Right.
Um, and there are a wide range of these different benchmarks. The ones that you'll see very often mentioned in a lot of these blog posts and press releases are ones that you've mentioned: MMLU, massive multitask language understanding. It's really all about understanding how well does the model understand a wide range of tasks. HelloSwag you mentioned. HelloSwag refers to the model's ability to predict what's happening next. There's a wide range of these different benchmarks, and you can see where they'd be very practical, right? But if you're looking at a table, and to your point, Francesca, you're a marketing manager or you're working in data analysis, you don't have a background in computer science or machine learning, this is a lot of just noise for you.
Yeah.
And I think what we're advocating for is a more practical set of benchmarks. For example, is it multimodal? In other words, can you interact with the chat agent in a way that deals with more than just text? Can you provide it images? Will it process a spreadsheet? Will it do any sort of analysis on a spreadsheet? Can you upload different types of files? I think these are very practical benchmarks for people to consider before they decide whether they want to pay, $20 a month to use one chat agent over another.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of the excitement around Claude, I think, is very justified because it is a meaningful improvement over where it used to be. And quite frankly, when it comes to things like writing text, I do find it to be more effective than, GPT-4. That said, there are a number of things that I will continue to use GPT-4 over Claude any day of the week. And one of those things is just data analysis. The fact that GPT-4 has something like Code Interpreter built into it, where you can upload a spreadsheet, manipulate the data in that spreadsheet, it alone, I think, gives it an advantage over Claude 3. But you don't really see something like that appear in these benchmarks. So to me, that's a very practical, thing that I think people who are deciding to use some of these models should know in advance. And, there's a wide range of other types of benchmarks, as well. Things like UI, right? How easy is it to, share
Yeah.
a chat session with someone on your team, or to get them to be able to reproduce the results that you had with either Claude or GPT, 4. So I think what we're getting at is like, can we define a more, practical set of ways that you can evaluate these tools before you or your team decide to adopt them?
Yeah. And it, firstly, to echo what you said about these benchmarks, these scientific benchmarks being super important, it's also important because, we are in a race, which means there needs to be some kind of universal benchmark that all of these companies are developing their models against to just make it a valid race. And so, the fact that these scientific benchmarks exist means that we can have a table like the one that Anthropic is putting out, that Gemini has these results for something like Hellaswag, and so does ChatGPT and Claude. But what I find fascinating about this blog post is that Anthropic seems to actually realize that there needs to be some translation to the user, maybe in the workplace, because buried at the bottom of the blog post is a very plain English explanation of potential uses for each of the Claude 3 models. And so if I look at the one that is for Claude 3 Opus, it writes in plain English, Claude 3 Opus is our most intelligent model with best in market performance on highly complex tasks. And then it tells me the context window of 200K, with an asterisk, depending on various things, and then potential uses that do sound very similar to the potential uses that we've been discussing internally, Anthony, Shane, and I, but
Yep.
also potential uses that you hear people, your friends, your family, your coworkers actually using these LLMs for. And so Anthropic writes for Claude 3 Opus, potential uses include task automation across APIs and databases, interactive coding, research and development for drug discovery or reviewing research, strategy for financial and market trends, for advanced analysis of charts and graphs. And those sound exactly like the tasks,
Yeah.
particularly the last ones, that our marketing manager and data analyst would really need help with. And so it is
Mhm.
there. The information is there in the blog post. Anthropic is cognizant of this need for a translation of which model would work, but it's really buried under the blog post. It is not written in comparison with the other models, and is something that probably is maybe the most important thing
Right.
for the
Mhm.
casual user who just wants to get their job done.
Yeah. It's funny because the way you illustrate it is like is spot on. Like, there are we're in a race and we're in an echo chamber, right? So like these blog posts are I think um are showing off to the AI community where they're at, which is
Yeah.
great. Like
Yes.
we're
It's a
we're front,
fabulous blog post.
right. We're front row seats, but the who every what we want to see is like we want to see the average business user, you know, read what you just said, the task automation, R&D, you could use this for your team. Like that's the top of the post, right? For us, right? Where if you're not within 100 miles of San Francisco, people that are hearing about AI, it's like, well, like how do we use this at our company?
Mhm.
Like it's like not that they're going to go like, well, you can get a hella swag score of 86%.
Right.
They're going to be like, I don't talking about.
Yeah.
What we want eventually and what we're here for is to say like, hey, like your business or your team or you as an individual, you need to start using probably all three of these models. You're going to have to invest, maybe $60 a month for a couple months and try all these to get your job to be done, and see which model actually, see which one of these companies are giving you the best results. And then at some point, maybe just pick one or get your boss to buy you one. We're recommending to team managers that are trying to get their teams to use AI is to do the same. Buy 10 of your best people on your team, all three of these models, give them tasks, jobs to be done, all of the tasks to be done. Forget about these benchmarks, create your own, and then say, we love Anthropic over ChatGPT for the various reasons, like Shane brought up, like we like the UI, which is not a benchmark they have. And we really think that that's going to be powerful for businesses. We are certainly, I think we could all chime on this, recommending that if you're an individual contributor or you're a director of a department, your team needs to be using these things.
Mhm.
Like you need to figure out how to get this stuff in your workflow. And the only way that you can get it in your workflow is to actually program time for your team to do it. It should be an OKR that says, I have all 10 of my team members using all three of these chat bots regularly to get their jobs to be done, and showing the proof of work. So we're all as a team learning how to use this because we think this is the future of work. What do you guys think about that?
I totally agree that people should be experimenting with multiple different products. I mean, these companies are absolutely in a race, and which one is better at any given time, it changes, and it's very context dependent. I mean, I find that I'm constantly switching back and forth between GPT-4 and Claude 3. In fact, sometimes I'll take the output of one and feed it to the other. Interestingly, I did a battery of tests just comparing them side by side, everything from, asking it to complete code to, look at images of very difficult machine learning questions to having it write formulas for me in Excel. And, which one is better? It doesn't always remain the same, and in fact,
Mhm.
GPT-4, I find to be significantly better when it comes to doing coding and more technical / data analysis type of work. Claude, I just find to be a lot more human sounding when you're producing text. So I think people should really, I think the costs of the paid models for each of these is more than justified if you can really learn how to use these tools effectively, because the productivity that it enables is just kind of astonishing to me. And it is $20 a month, which I know for some people it can be quite a lot, especially when you're paying for so many other subscriptions these days. But especially for teams, I think, at least for a few months, buy a few of these subscriptions, experiment, see which ones work in the very specific use cases that you're using over and over again. Because you may surprise yourself. You may, in fact, find that you actually want to have both, because for different workflows, one or the other may work a lot better. And
Yeah.
one of the other benchmarks that we talked about Gemini a few weeks back, and without getting bogged down in the saga that is Google's own AI race, one of the things that I do find very helpful, or at least where I see a ton of potential, is the fact that they are baking in their own chat agent into many of their different products. And that is something that both Claude and GPT don't do yet. And I think Claude and GPT are definitely preferable to me over Gemini, but I would definitely keep an eye on Gemini, because those models are going to get better, and what they have is a huge built-in user base.
Yeah.
And I just expect that workflow in itself, not having to switch screens, go to a chat session, and then switch back, take your results, copy and paste it into a presentation or a doc. That, I think, in itself is a benchmark that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Shane, because that's kind of where I wanted to go. Personally, I love the idea of trying out all the different, any chatbot that you can get your hands on, anything with a a free trial or something that the free version of that model. And obviously you're not just limited to these three chatbots. These are the three big players, but other companies are developing chatbots for different users. So Cohere, for example, is doing something more enterprise specific. Perplexity for search. And so I love the idea of trying everything, but to go back to the original point about benchmarks, I feel like if you are a person who isn't necessarily the most tech savvy or the most interested in getting your hands on every chatbot and typing in the same problem for your job, and you really just want to get the solution right away, I think this is where it is so important to have very relevant benchmarks or just relevant features explicitly outlined for you so that you can just very easily whittle down which chatbot is the right one for you right away. And I
Yep.
think of the Google workspace integration as a great example. If I'm using Google Workspace and it is very plainly outlined to me that Gemini is the only chatbot integrated, and I don't have to have a ton of windows open and I don't need to sign up for 2 accounts, then that's like job done. And
Yeah.
that's not even being, done for us yet in a very straightforward way. In this and in the same vein, even very simple and common words in these announcements like context window, like multimodal, those aren't intuitive words. It's not intuitive what a massive context window is, why that's important to someone. It's not intuitive what multimodal is and why that's important to someone. But if someone tells me that as a legal assistant, this chatbot will give me the best advantage for uploading, case documents and getting really specific, dates that this event happened. That's going to be the chatbot that I want to
Yeah.
use. Or if I'm, a solo entrepreneur who has to create, marketing emails by myself for a new line of, jewelry that I'm creating, then that's not going to, context window is not going to matter to me. But multimodal might, if I can upload a piece of, jewelry that I just made and the chatbot can help me craft an email for it. So
Right.
the exploration is just really fun. It's honestly really fun. It's honestly really amazing to see how many different options we have now that we literally didn't have 3 years ago. But these benchmarks could be so useful for people to pick the right one the first time and save them a lot of time if they don't really have the time or can't afford to do this exploration. And I wish that
Right.
were made clearer than just the footnote of a blog post.
As you're talking, both of you guys, I'm just going like, yeah, we're gonna produce our own benchmark, right? Like we're just like almost what you just said, because the technology business, which I've been a member of a really long time, will always promote like we have 84 cores, like it's like for the average user, it's like 84 cores of what?
Right.
You know what I mean? It just we and so it's like this mixture of insider and knowledge leaking into consumer or marketing where it kind of doesn't, it kind of matters and it doesn't matter. And and what both you guys are saying is like, super convenience wins the day almost in all cases, right? If I'm a Microsoft shop, I'm gonna use probably what Microsoft has because I already have the license, right? Or if I'm a Google shop and I have Google Suite, you know I'm probably gonna wait for my team to like, I might do some exploration with a part of my team, and then since the rest of the company is gonna get it, it's an incremental value add, and it's integrated into everything and sheets and all that. I really think that that's probably the path that a lot of companies are gonna go, and it's probably also the most logical path, forget the convenient path. Um, and then what Shane was talking about switching, like, there's nothing more than I hate switching windows, like, if I'm, like, in VS Code, like, I don't wanna switch anywhere. I wanna stay my coding mindset doesn't wanna switch,
Right.
and I think VS Code is, like, has done a really good job at allowing people plugging into VS Code, and you can kind of have everything there. And I believe that Microsoft and Google are gonna do the same with adding sort of Gen AI to their products, and I think that's gonna change the world, for the better, for the common person. Like, I know that, Francesca, you brought up this esoteric site, ONET, which kind of breaks down, which is a really cool, we'll put it in the, show notes, but it kind of breaks down, like, all the tasks one would like, almost like all the tasks a single user would do, and an individual contributor would do, and it's quite well researched. Um, and you can kinda tick those off to, like, saying, "Okay, you're gonna use PowerPoint or Sheets or, all these things," and then you can kinda, like, do a sub bullet saying, "Okay, well, these AIs are gonna help aid you to do all those." It's like a way to, like, refocus the conversation from, like, task jobs to be done, application that's gonna do it, and sub-application, like, how AI is gonna make you go faster, stronger, and I will say that if you're not trying that as a team, your competitors or your teammates that are doing that, they're gonna smoke you in sort of productivity, and that's what we're trying to get people's heads around, the average business person. It's like, productivity is gonna matter. These AIs, regardless of where they're benchmarked, they'll probably make you more productive,
Right.
and you should be getting your team to use it.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
and
message.
we've always talked about, it's never one thing in isolation, right? It's never
Right.
just the AI doing the task in isolation, and that's what you submit without you getting eyes on it, without, these chatbots are still all prompt based, without you giving the prompt to the chatbot and the instruction to what you want produced, without you giving the prompt to edit the output or to correct the chatbot. And so there's never anything in isolation. What I really like about ONET, and we'll put the link in the show notes, but it's ONET online.org. It is this jobs database, and every time you search a job, and so for example, I have here up market research analyst and marketing specialist, it will tell me the occupation specific information of tasks. And so tasks include preparing reports of findings and illustrating data graphically, so creating charts, um, collecting and analyzing consumer data, so demographics, preferences, needs, forecasting, marketing trends, monitoring industry stats and sort of industry literature. And what I like about this database, I actually learned about this database at a talk at the Women in Data Science conference a few weeks ago. It was really showcasing that AI in itself, at least these AI tools that we're talking about, they're operating on a task based framework in the workplace. So when
Mhm.
we are using these chatbots, what we're really using these chatbots for is to achieve a task. There is a task that we know we want to accomplish in the workplace as a marketing specialist. And then I'm turning to my AI. And the AI isn't addressing, the existential meaning of a marketing specialist. It isn't addressing sort of the place of the marketing specialist in the context of the industry or in the context of the company. It's really addressing what task does a marketing specialist need to accomplish every day, and how is the AI going to actually, prepare these reports of findings, actually analyze customer trends, actually tell you about, the industry literature. And so I feel like with this, you can really see a direct translation from task to, prompt to AI tool to output, and then
Yep.
reiterate or
Mhm.
Yep.
iterate on that. Yeah.
When you brought this website up and I looked at it, I was like, "Wow, this it's there." It was really like all the tasks are really well outlined, and like I was just thinking of building like a chart of how AI can actually help you at that individual task level. And I actually think that in 3 years that this podcast won't make any sense to anyone because they'll be
Yes.
like, "Yeah, of course." Like, you really will this podcast will not age well because it will just become like of course we use a web browser every day. What are you guys talking about? Like, because
Yeah.
it will just be commonplace,
I mean,
right?
imagine that this, ONet database was like, the AI already knew this information, and I could just say, hey, I'm a marketing specialist, and this is what I need to accomplish for my company today. There's a big client pitch that I want to do, and it's already got all the tasks that ONet has outlined, and the AI just gives me the entire deck. And that
Yeah, I mean,
completely age our podcast.
Shane, you're going to jump in here, and we're kind of coming to a place where we're going to be getting to the end of this, but this podcast. But it's like what you just said there, Francesca. It's like, okay, in 3 years, I'm expecting that like your marketing manager is going to basically have something in a calendar that says prepare deck for company retreat,
Yeah.
and it's not that you're gonna prepare it, it's the AI is gonna have sort of this agent kinda capability where it's prepared for you. It's probably sent emails to all your colleagues saying, "What do you wanna have at our retreat?" It's collated them, it's made the deck, and now I'm just actually perusing it to tune it, right? It's not that I have to produce it, I have to tune it, I have to humanize it, I have to make it special for my team, my company, my client. The in 3 years, we're not gonna be putting that stuff together. It's gonna be put together for us to kind of finish. It's sort of like microwaving a meal. It's already prepped. You just need to actually pop it in and microwave it. I think that's the future of work kind of forward. It's like the AIs are gonna do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we have to actually tune it up. Shane, let's get you in here.
I think so. I have a few observations in response to some of what you guys are saying, but I think really it all it's really all kind of focused on this idea of tasks, right? And um and how the nature of work I think might change as a result of this technology, right? So Anthony, you're talking about agents, and for those who again who don't pay close attention to all the jargon and developments really at the metal of what's going on here. I mean, we're talking about the ability of one of these, chat agents or bots or whatever you're interacting with for it to be able to execute a series of tasks for you, right? And right now, your interaction with something like ChatGPT or Claude from Anthropic, it's a constant exchange of information where you've really got to stay, immediately involved in that interaction. You ask it to do something, immediately it spits back a response. But I think what a lot of people on the inside of this industry are chasing is this idea that you can give a set of instructions to one of these agents and it doesn't necessarily need to get back to you right away. It's going to go off and execute a series of different tasks. And that may take several hours or even a week, right? To really go from start to finish and completing an entire workflow. I know there are a lot of teams that are out working towards this goal. I haven't quite seen something that really actually accomplishes it. But what I would encourage people to do, and we always say you have to experiment with the tools. In the context of ONet, I would encourage people to think through what are the tasks that you're constantly doing? What are the workflows that you're constantly mired in? What are all the repetitive things that you have to do every day? And just spend some time reflecting on how can I automate this given the technology that's available today? And I know a lot of people don't really want to do that because you get stuck in the inertia of your day to day. And when you slow down to just ponder what it is you're doing, I think the temptation is very real to think that you're just not being productive, right? So my hunch is we're entering an era where it's less about doing and really more about thinking and allocating and delegating.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to do that audit, both with their teams and at work, but also in their personal life. And the last thing that I would say is it's not just limited to ChatGPT and Claude. Like these tools dominate the discussion every day. They're the ones that have, real name brand, but there are literally thousands and thousands of point solutions that were, tuned to do very specific tasks. There are tools to, create presentations. There are tools to do sales outreach. So part of this audit process, I think that people need to do is less about, what are all the different ways that GPT-4 versus Gemini Advanced versus Claude can help me. Go on YouTube. Like that is like one of my favorite places to learn about these technologies, because you may find a lot of solutions that are very purpose built to do a very specific set of tasks. And I think you find the right one and it'll save you a ton of time, but it just takes some
Yeah,
investigation to get there.
we have a website that's coming out that will have a lot of that heavy lifting done for you, with coai.co. And we're gonna, Shane's painstakingly looking at a lot of YouTube videos, and he's compiling a list of the ones that are probably best suited for you, because you know what we're finding when we're talking to clients and people and when we're advising them, we find ourselves saying the same thing, and then what we're doing is we're trying to create the playlist, create like what to do, how to attack that, because there is an ocean of content out there, and no one has an ocean of time to do it. And so we're trying to break it down. And part of the podcast that we're doing together here is to try to break that down, letting everyone know that we're here to sort of help you kind of think about the future, and then kind of give you that data that's easily consumed. Before we sign off, I just wanted to make sure, Francesca, if you had any thoughts, exiting thoughts, or Shane, or if not, we could just wrap it up and kind of get back to our daily job, our tasks.
Yeah, I would say that my final thought on this is, and to bring it back to the original topic, which were, these scientific benchmarks not being necessarily, as relatable to maybe, the professional who just wants to know which of these LLMs they should use for their job. I like Shane's suggestion a lot of, take some time to think about what your tasks are, or which tasks you immediately want to address with one of these LLMs. And that in itself is going to give you a pretty robust and, more importantly, relevant set of benchmarks that you can quite easily then, base your exploration on, and have these, maybe 5 starting prompts for 5 tasks that you complete on a regular basis for the 3, major LLMs. And, carry those benchmarks with you every time there's a new release, every time, that you encounter something on, Instagram Reels covering a new tool, or YouTube covering a new tool.
Yeah.
But having that, list of personal and relevant benchmarks in your pocket that, unfortunately, Anthropic is not putting at the top of the blog post, and that maybe there is some, 2, 3 levels of translation that are necessary to go from, these scientific benchmarks, or these, terms like multimodal or context window. But just, knowing that we live in the world today where you've got to be, using these tools to some extent, and just already knowing how you want to be aided by these tools will really help you find the right one really quickly.
Yeah. And it's a continuous process too. It's not
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
you're going to do this work now, this audit on your own set of tasks, and then you've decided on your tool and then you're done. I mean,
Mhm.
the fact is the industry is just moving so fast because these companies are in a race. They're constantly leapfrogging each other in terms of ability. Been a lot of talk about when GPT-5 is going to come out. That may change the conversation entirely, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Totally.
you really do just have to reserve constant time to just research and think about, what is the right tool for the task today? Because the answer to that question may very likely be different 3 months from now or even sooner.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I feel like the takeaway for the business owner, manager, or just a single individual worker is like, you're in a major technical shift, like it or not. And the smart move is to make time to be like almost constantly aware of this, and like what Francesca said, trying. And if you're a business manager or a business owner, it's probably more imperative than ever. And, stay tuned with us. This podcast will be back again, kind of trying to tell the story that the average sort of business owner can use and try. And then on the website, coai.co, we'll have all this stuff posted and lots of things for you to read and learn from and join the community. And of course, I think Shane, we're hiring. We're definitely got internships positions open. We'll have that all in the show notes, and everyone can kind of join our community and kind of make this shift together, because we want to make sure everyone becomes AI literate, and also more importantly, the people that to become AI competent on their daily jobs. And so we'll see you guys next week.
See ya.